Today, I want to talk to you a little bit about remakes in general and in specifics. Now, it recently just came out, at least in a news report online, which take that with a grain of salt, that they are remaking the original Resident Evil 4. That might sound like it's par for the course to some of you. RE2 and RE3 were recently remade. But I want to talk about my issue with this in the landscape of gaming and also just in the Resident Evil franchise, because I've seen a lot of disingenuous takes on this that I really, really don't agree with, that I think are a complete joke. Now, Resident Evil 4 came out originally in 2005. It's been ported up every single console generation. This thing is Skyrim before its time in terms of playing on your mother's toaster oven. I mean, it's a joke in terms of there's actual memes about how many times this has been ported to different consoles. In fact, that's one of the first points I saw on Twitter about this after this news came out was, well, it's already everywhere. Why do we need this? Which is true. I mean, this is a very accessible game. But I really do think remakes can be a fantastic thing in gaming. Now, before you get super upset at me saying that, you have to think there have been remakes that have come out in the last couple of years that have been fantastic. If you look at something like Resident Evil 2 or 3, those were both remade. The originals are pretty clunky by today's standards at very least. Much more so than Resident Evil 4, like leaps and bounds more clunky. And they were modernized, made into sort of a modern survival horror shooter, and they sold really well. They did good. People liked them. There's some outliers that didn't enjoy them, but overall they were received really well. And another game that I will definitely talk about in a little bit, Final Fantasy VII Remake. Fantastic game, very different from the original, but really good. So I am not against remakes in general. What I am against is remakes of things that have aged completely fine. Resident Evil 4 is that sort of game, and I don't think this is a great precedent to really be setting. Remaking games this quickly, I guess, to me doesn't seem necessary at all. I just don't. If you look at something like Resident Evil 4, it holds up extremely well today. You look at the shooting mechanics. Yes, the controls can be a little clunky. They're meant to be. It's this weird cross between a tank control system and a modern action shooter. And it was meant to preserve that level of survival horror. It does what it's supposed to do. It's not like Resident Evil 1, 2, or 3, where it was also extremely limited by the technology at the time and had to be that way in some ways and was also that way in order to preserve those elements. No, this was kept purposely that way in order to preserve those survival horror elements. It still holds up. It still does what it's supposed to. It actually still looks completely fine. And that's the issue that I have with this. I think that these people saying like, well, you're a hipster if you don't want this remade because you just think it's perfect and can't be touched, I think that's super disingenuous. And while I do have a Twitter, this is sort of the armchair game developer take you can expect to get on Twitter as someone who thinks that, well, anyone who doesn't want new thing is hipster, which is silly and stupid. At the same time, I also don't really believe that this can never be touched. Maybe in 15 years, this game won't have aged as well. Maybe it'll look terrible by then. Maybe it will play terrible compared to everything else that people have gotten used to in terms of survival horror, especially with Capcom sort of redefining that with RE2 and RE3. Maybe they will continue to redefine that. And maybe at that point, this will be necessary. But I really disagree with this being the move right now. If you look at Capcom, there's plenty of other games that do need remasters, or remakes, I mean. Things like Code Veronica. I mean, this was made 1 year after Resident Evil 3. Not 5 years or 6 years after, because RE4 was 6 years, 2005 versus 99. No, Code Veronica was made in 2000. This game is kind of clunky. I personally think it's a fun game. I think there's not many Resident Evil games I dislike, to be fair. But this could use a from-the-ground rebuild. I think that would be fair. Something like Dino Crisis, which is considered a classic from Capcom, could use a from-the-ground-up rebuild. Even something like Devil May Cry 2, the original Devil May Cry 2. This game is really a step backwards from a lot of things in the first game. You could rebuild this game completely, remake it, and make a really good DMC game. You really could with the original Dante character with a great story. You could do that. Capcom has titles that I believe are deserving of remakes. This is not one of them. Again, if we look at Final Fantasy VII, just to give you an actual example of a remake I love, the original Final Fantasy VII is one of my favorite games of all time ever made. But look at it. It's not visually appealing today at all, in any way. Unless you grew up with this, a lot of people are going to be put off by this. And that's just the way it is. The visuals are going to put people off. You also have things like the turn-based combat system, which haven't really, I guess, made it into modern day quite as well. I mean, you have the Bravely Default games and Pokemon where it's still popular, but in a lot of ways, the turn-based RPG system has fallen by the wayside a little bit. And especially this sort of version where it was turn-based plus time-based with the gauges, I think that really is different to a lot of people today. So it made sense to modernize this game, to make it a slightly different story, to make it a game today in 2020 that has visuals that can sort of reimagine what people grew up with or what people missed out on because they were too young. That happens too. This is a remake I think makes complete sense. This is a remake I am totally down with in the gaming industry, and I love the idea of. Remakes are not bad, but I really don't understand this decision, and I just guess I wanted to not vent really, but talk about that a little bit today. And I guess my point is not to say at all that I won't play this game ever. That is not the point. If this is a fantastic game, definitely I'd be interested. I just think that there's plenty of other games that probably could use it first, and especially that this has not aged to the point where it's necessary. Maybe other people feel a different way. I'm sure it will sell like hotcakes, and if it's fantastic, I'll play it too. I just wanted to voice my misunderstanding in terms of the gaming market being so ready to jump on particular products for a remake when there's other ones in their library that really suffer from not holding up in today's day and age. I'm definitely interested in what you all think in the comments down below. Sometimes you bring a different take to the table that I didn't really think of. I am very much okay with video game remakes and on board with a lot of them if the game has aged poorly. I just don't think this is an example of a Capcom game that's aged poorly and needs it, but you know what? I still hope this game is great. I still love the Resident Evil remakes, and I want to see it. I just think we're getting a little out of hand at this point about how much we're deciding to go back and yank forward to 2020 by building it again from the ground up. I don't know. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Be sure to like the video if you liked it. Dislike if you dislike it. That's fine too. And hey, check out the Discord, Reddit, Instagram, Twitter, Patreon. We're all over the place, and I hope to engage with you on any of those platforms. I'll see you soon. Have a fantastic day and stay awesome.